You're listening to Audiology. Support this channel by becoming a member and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. The six-party system marks the current phase in US politics, following the era known as the fifth-party system. The exact start of this period is a topic of debate among experts, with some suggesting it began in the late 1960s, while others point to the Republican Revolution of 1994 as its commencement. Despite these differences, scholars agree that this era is characterized by a deep divide between the Democratic and Republican parties. This division is not shallow. It's rooted in deep-seated issues, including socioeconomic, class, cultural, religious, educational, and racial debates, as well as differing views on the government's role in society. The sixth-party system marks a major shift in American politics, transforming from the arrangements of the fifth-party system that formed during the New Deal. The Republican Party gained a stronghold in the South, rural regions, and suburbs, primarily attracting white evangelical voters. On the other hand, the Democratic Party took root in urban areas, with a voter base that grew to include trade unionists, city workers, progressive thinkers, and a blend of racial, ethnic, and religious minorities. A pivotal moment for this switch was during the 1980s, often referred to as the Reagan era, which significantly altered the political landscape. Despite much discussion, experts haven't agreed on a specific electoral event that definitively shifted control from the Democrats to the Republicans since the Great Depression, which gave rise to the fifth-party system. Scholars have debated whether this shift was happening in real time or had already occurred, with notable mentions of the late 1960s as a critical period of realignment. Observations point out that the fifth-party system's durability is quite impressive, considering previous systems lasted only about 30 to 40 years, hinting that a seventh-party system might have been expected early in the 21st century. Traditionally, significant losses by the dominant party in consecutive House elections, as well as a presidential election loss around the same time, signal a realignment. This occurred in favor of the Democrats between 2006 and 2008, yet the Republicans made a considerable comeback in 2010 and further solidified their position in 2014. According to The Logic of American Politics in its 2017 edition, the sixth-party system is firmly established, characterized by the Republican Party's pronounced strength and dominance, highlighted by controlling Congress and achieving significant electoral victories into 2016. Writing in 2020, political scientists Mark D. Brewer and L. Sandy Maisel pointed out the deep divisions between Republicans and Democrats in this system, driven by differences in social class, cultural issues, race, ethnicity, and opinions on federal government size and scope. In their 2021 work, Parties and Elections in America, the Electoral Process, they argue that there's a general consensus on the presence of the sixth-party system, rooted in the electoral politics since the 1960s, despite some disagreement on how it came about and its exact characteristics. However, what experts do agree on is that American electoral politics has undergone significant changes since the 1960s. There are different viewpoints on when the sixth-party system got started. Some say it began with the elections from 1966 to 1968, or possibly in 1972 during the 1980s, when political parties started to show a stronger sense of unity and division, or even in the 1990s, driven by cultural differences. Political scientist Stephen C. Craig believes the turning point was the 1972 election, when Richard Nixon achieved a near-universal victory in 49 states. He points out, there seems to be consensus on the appropriate name for the sixth-party system. Changes that occurred during the 1960s were so great and so pervasive that they cry out to be called a critical election period. The new system of candidate-centered parties is so distinct and so portentous that one can no longer deny its existence or its character. According to the Princeton Encyclopedia of American Political History, this era started in 1980, with Ronald Reagan's election to the presidency and Republicans taking control of the Senate. Arthur Paulson provides a broader time frame, suggesting the sixth-party system came about between 1964 and 1972, regardless of whether the shifts in electoral dynamics since the 1960s are referred to as realignment or not. Some experts believe that we are currently in a unique phase of political transition, similar to a period in 1824 when the old political system had collapsed, but a new one hadn't yet formed. This idea comes from the observation that after Donald Trump's presidential win in 2016, there's a growing discussion about whether a new party system is emerging. This discussion is fueled by the way Trump has significantly changed the Republican Party, prompting the Democratic Party to evolve in response. Mark D. Brewer and L. Sandy Maisel, for example, pointed out the increasing debate over whether we're entering a new era in party politics due to these changes. One key argument for the emergence of a new party system revolves around changes in who's voting for whom. The demographic of non-white voters who mainly support the Democrats is increasing. Meanwhile, college-educated whites who used to lean Republican are increasingly voting for the Democrats. Conversely, the Republican Party has gained ground among white voters without a college degree, while maintaining strong support from evangelical voters. Another point of interest is the Democratic Party's recent track record in presidential elections. In the last 8 elections, the Republican candidate has only won the popular vote once, when George W. Bush was re-elected in 2004. This is a marked shift from previous years, where Republicans had a winning streak, highlighting a significant change in voter behavior and party dynamics in the 21st century. One possible reason there is no clear consensus on when the sixth party system started is due to a short phase of de-alignment that came just before it. De-alignment happens when a significant portion of voters step away from their prior political party loyalty but do not immediately choose a new one. The scholars Ronald Inglehart and Avram Hochstein have pinpointed the American de-alignment period as spanning from 1958 to 1968. While most experts agree on the de-alignment explanation, there are a handful of political scientists who believe that the role of party allegiance was so strong during this time, suggesting that the extent of de-alignment has been somewhat overstated. Harris and Tichenor have pointed out that during the era known as the sixth party system, the main conflicts were all about deciding which rights should be granted to different groups within society. Initially, these conflicts centered around issues like race-based school desegregation and affirmative action policies. However, it wasn't long before issues related to women, with a particular focus on abortion rights, started to receive just as much attention. Over time, the fight for environmental protection in the 1980s and gay rights in the 1990s also became key concerns. In terms of changes in who was voting for whom, there was a noticeable shift with the rise of the religious right. This group brought together Catholics and evangelical Protestants who found common ground in their opposition to abortion and same-sex marriage. Meanwhile, Southern white voters, who began supporting Republican presidential candidates back in the 1950s, expanded their allegiance to include Republican state and local candidates by the 1990s. In the whirlwind journey to select the Democratic nominee for president in 1968, Hubert Humphrey secured the nomination without participating in any of the primary elections. Instead of relying on votes from the general public, decisions were made by state and local party leaders through a system that leaned heavily on local caucuses and party conventions. This situation changed in 1972, following the Democratic Party's adoption of changes recommended by the McGovern-Fraser Commission. These reforms shifted the focus to primary elections, a move the Republican Party also adopted. As a result, local political figures who once wielded significant power in shaping the party's presidential ticket and had considerable sway in Washington found their influence markedly reduced. Consequently, national conventions transformed from being arenas of intense negotiation and deal-making to events where the primary election's winner was simply confirmed, effectively serving as a formal acknowledgement of their victory. Spending on political campaigns experienced a significant increase, thanks to new methods of raising funds. This significant growth did not come from businesses or labor groups, but rather from the political parties' network organizations, especially at the national level among state-elected officials and party leaders. The United States Supreme Court played a key role in enhancing this trend with its Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission decision in 2010. This ruling allowed companies, labor unions, and super-political action committees to spend unlimited amounts on advertising close to elections, within 30 days of a primary and 60 days of a general election. To illustrate the impact, spending by groups not affiliated with the political parties was $144 million in the 2008 presidential election. By the 2012 election, that number had increased to over $1 billion. At the state level, the 21st century marked the beginning of intense fundraising and spending on advertisements in the races for justices of state Supreme Courts. Bernie Sanders' presidential campaigns in 2016 and 2020 were notable for being heavily funded by small-dollar online donations. Looking back since 1980, there have only been 3 instances where the candidate who raised less money won the presidency. Ronald Reagan in 1980, who raised less than Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton in 1996, who was outraised by Bob Dole, and Donald Trump in 2016, who raised less money than Hillary Clinton. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.